In that comparison, I'll say Uganda is slow. People take their time. You schedule a meeting. Somebody says, okay, like, tell me about that and be honest with it. Like, because
but Bunny, I see you trying to hit 1 million views on this one, huh? You're trying to sacrifice me. I still want to do business here, man. I still want to do business here.
Hey, UG boy, let's talk to them. Let's talk, chicka, 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 let's talk to them. Let's talk to them. Let's talk to them. Let's talk, chicka, 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 let's talk to them. Yeah, I'm from a beautiful place, the Pearl of Africa. Hailing with a 256, it's in my blood. That's a gem where the mountains rise, with stories untold. The tapestry of cultures unfolding, so vibrant and bold. A symphony of stars, a celestial light. The drums beating, echoing through the night, just like a beacon of light. A reflection that's coming up from the Nile. I'm flowing straight into the heart of Africa, with timeless stories untold. What's up, dog?
3, 2, 1, go.
welcome back to the Ugandan Boy Talk Show. And today we have an exciting guest joining us, Yussouf, the CEO of BAG, an innovative HR tech startup in Rwanda, revolutionizing the way companies find and manage talent. He's also the host of the What I'm Building podcast, where he dives deep into the journeys of entrepreneurs across Africa, from navigating the startup ecosystem to shaping the future of work in Africa. Yussouf has a wealth of knowledge to share, and get ready for an insightful conversation about tech, entrepreneurship, podcasting, evolving job market on the continent. And let's dive right in. Welcome, my brother, to my podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man.
Bro, it's so I felt like when I have my guests, like it's good to acknowledge what they do in a depth way, because when you sit back and listen to this introduction, and my last episode is the guy was telling me I've done all those things, but sitting back hearing you read everything, it makes me feel like, man, I've done all that, and it's pretty cool. So I want to give you flowers and excited to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate it, man. Big fan of the work that you're doing. Love to always engage other creators who are, sharing the stories of interesting people on the continent. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir. We're gonna have a great one. I want to start the podcast with asking you how you got connected to the Ugandan Boy Talk Show. When was the first time you found about it, and how did you find about the Ugandan Boy Talk Show?
Sure. So I think so the first time I came to Uganda for work was around October last year. And I think when I came here, usually when I'm about to come into a new city, when I'm coming to a country for the first time, I usually try to understand who are the people in my space. So for example, because I've been working in the HR tech space for a while, I would try and connect with people who are in the HR space, or HR managers, people running HR companies, and so on and so forth. And since over the last 1.5 year-ish, I've launched my podcast and been growing that podcast. I'm also interested in meeting people who are in the podcast space, right? So when I first came to Uganda, I was trying to connect with entrepreneurs on the, in the country, but also I was like, yeah, let me find out what are some of the interesting podcasts. And I think there's this weird, it's not weird. It's actually pretty simple. The algorithm on Instagram, right, which understands that you are in a different region, and then it's able to start recommending various different pieces of content that are relevant to some of the things that you are following. So I follow a lot of podcasters. So I think that's how it popped up to my news feed, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting podcast. And I was like, yeah, let me connect with Bonnie and see what he's up to, and see what it's like to run a podcast in Uganda.
That is amazing, and I really appreciate that. I love that. And when you sent me the email, I was like, that's cool, because this is the type of thing I love. Collaborations, I love learning from people, and I believe like knowledge does not end And I, when you sent me the email, you sent me a link to your podcast. It's amazing, man. It is beautiful the way you do your production, the way you have conversation with
Thank you,
people.
man.
It's like, and I was like, yeah, this is somebody I can talk to, learn things about entrepreneurship. And this has been a thing. Like many people have told me, oh, you bring a lot of artists, celebrities in Uganda, but I've not really had a lot of people in entrepreneurship. And however, like we're going to talk about podcasting and stuff, but I want to pick some knowledge about entrepreneurship because it's a great opportunity. I don't think I've had anybody on the podcast who is like specializing in entrepreneurship in that area and how you see it in the African continent because this podcast is listened to by a lot of people. But yeah, kudos to you for the work that you do. And when we were talking
Thank you,
on
man.
WhatsApp, send me a picture of how you met Steve. Steve is one of the people that I look up to on Jay Shetty for podcasting. And we had a conversation. And on that message you sent me on the bottom, you said you met him in 2023. And he said, you told him about a desire to start a podcast. And he said, it's not easy. And now you realize it later. A lot of people don't realize like
Yeah.
podcasting is hard actually. You talked about the logistics and everything that goes on for people to see this episode on YouTube. How have you discovered that journey in podcasting? How has it been like for you when you realize it's not an easy job to do?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, basically, I've been a huge fan of Stephen Bartlett and The Diary of a CEO. It's one of the podcasts that I can sit down. I always tell people that, you know, the same way that people sit down and watch movies for 2-3 hours, like I watch 3 hour, 4 hour episodes of Huberman or Joe Rogan or, you know, Diary of a CEO, as long as I'm very interested in the topic, right? And so it was funny because I was traveling to Saudi Arabia for work. And then I was on the plane, and when I'm on the plane, I usually download a couple of episodes, and I'm just like listening to them, or I'm reading a book or something like that. And then, so when I was on the plane, I was actually listening to one of his podcasts. And then when I got there, we got to meet, and I was like, hey, you know, I was on the plane on my way here listening to your podcast. And then he was like, oh, really? Like, thank you so much. And I was like, fun fact, I'm actually launching a podcast as well, like in a couple of months, because it was already in process. Like I already been thinking about it. I had the concept already, but I hadn't launched it yet. So then I told him that. He was like, oh, really? Like, are you really going to find the time? Because, you know, we had connected and he knew that I was in the tech field. So he knew that I was running a startup. He was like, are you going to find the time? Because, you know, it's really, really, really draining even for myself and for the team. But, you know, it's super rewarding at the same time. And I was like, you know, I'll still give it a shot, you know? And so going back to your question, right? So I think I do enjoy podcasting. I think the reason why I started doing it is I tell people that is for selfish reasons,
That is a
right?
good one. That's a good point.
I
right there.
love, you know, I love meeting interesting people. And throughout my journey as a founder, I get to meet a lot of interesting people all over the world. We always end up grabbing a coffee or a drink and we talk for hours about interesting topics. And I'm always wondering, like, yeah, it would be interesting to have these conversations recorded so we can share them with the world. So people can just be like, yeah, I was there. Like, I was listening to these guys just chat about something they're passionate about. So I was like, yeah, this would be an interesting thing to do. And also another thing is that because you do a podcast, you get to meet a lot of interesting people, right? Because you're doing this podcast, we get to meet, right? Maybe we would have never met in other circumstances,
Exactly.
right? But then podcasting brought us together. And, you know, you end up maybe doing other projects with the people that you have on the podcast at the end of the day. But it's also really important for entrepreneurs in this day and age to connect with other entrepreneurs. So especially my podcast, which has a focus on entrepreneurship. I'm connecting with other entrepreneurs. I'm getting to learn from them. We're getting to collaborate. We're getting to become clients of each other's products, at a certain point. And, but yeah, it's also very challenging as well, you know, like all the way from booking guests, having the right equipment, right? Every podcaster will always tell you that they don't have enough equipment. They need the latest cameras. You need 4 other cameras. I need, 2 other whatever lights or something like that. And then so booking guests, having the right equipment, and also Another thing that is very important is also marketing, right? So how do you market your podcast? How do you make sure that you're reaching a lot of people? A lot of people don't understand these things, but it costs a lot of money to do these things.
Exactly.
It costs money. You have to hire teams. You have to spend a lot of time doing these kind of things, right? So that's one of the things that those are some of the things that I've realized about podcasting. And but again, just like anything, if you have enough passion, it can outweigh the challenges that you go through.
Listening to you speak, I'm like, yeah, that's the same mindset I had when I was doing my podcast. First of all, the very first answer you said, passion. It's a passion. You do it because you love
Yeah.
it. That alone is going to help you go through whatever it comes with it. But when you do it because you don't have that passion, it's one way, like, you're not going to be able to make it through. You got to love it first. And the other one was like what goes into that. A lot of people in Uganda, and every time when I come back to Uganda, when I go on radio to do interviews, they say, what would somebody do to do a podcast? You got to know it comes with a lot. Yes, there's a lot of people who are looking at it as you're getting money from it. The money will come, just like the minister in Uganda said. But before the money comes, you're gonna have to invest time. You're gonna have to invest money. There's a lot that's gonna come behind that to be able to get that money. But you gotta have the passion, and you gotta be able to put in the work. A lot of people say, "How do you do it?" Because it used to be a one-man show. But now, like, I got help from the Uganda that I do with the studio, which I wanted to improve the quality of work. For my older episodes, I would just video call to somebody, and they're in their house, their work. So kind of you don't get the quality from the back end, even the audio. So now that we have a studio, it makes the audio better. And that's the other thing, because when I listen to I listen to a lot of audio podcasts when I'm driving. That's my thing. Like, I listen to all of them. And only when I'm home or I'm doing something and like I have time to watch the video, that's when I watch the video podcast. So I was a big person into audio, like I wanted to improve the audio. But when you do it over the internet, you cannot guarantee the quality of audio you're going to get over the internet. But now that we
I
have,
agree.
now that we have your audio being recorded in that place without any dissertation, I have my audio being recorded here. The listeners don't hear this while we're using the medium, so I
Exactly.
get to put out a good quality. I know you asked this question. The reason why I'm saying this is you asked me on WhatsApp how I'm able to host a podcast from the US in Uganda. So this is the back end of it,
Yeah.
and to be able to have the audio at the after everything. So we record this audio separate. We just kind of merge the conversation together, and it's clean. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of work that goes into that, and it's been amazing. But
Maybe on that, maybe two things on that note. I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but
no. This
I have
actually
questions
this
as
is
well.
this is an open podcast, so for real. Like, feel free. I'm gonna do my thing, but
Yeah.
if you have a question, because I want you to be able, like, kind of, it's a collaboration. If you have a question about something,
Exactly.
an idea, we're gonna learn together, and that make it beautiful. So if you have a question, ask me a question. I'll continue with what I have. planned.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
man. And I usually tell also my guests, like, it's more of a conversation. We're just grabbing coffee.
Exactly.
It just happens that there's light
Exactly.
and there's cameras
I
around.
changed.
But don't worry about
I changed
any of
the
these
word from
things.
interview. Like, I don't even want to call it an interview. I don't even send.
Exactly.
We had a conversation about. So I don't send questions to my guests. No, I never do that.
Yeah.
Come as you are. I'll
Same.
do my job, and then we're gonna talk. So I have everything I want to talk to
Exactly.
you about, which you don't know. But I
Exactly.
did the
That's-
research, and we're gonna have a conversation. And yeah. But anyway,
Exactly. No, that's what the but so I was gonna talk about. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about monetization of podcasts? On the African continent, right? Because again, it's easy to monetize in other countries. Other continents, I would say, but then on the African continent, you see a lot of creators still struggling with YouTube monetization, right? A lot of countries people don't buy ads in certain countries, so you're not able to make a lot of money from that. But also at the same time, like things like convincing, sponsors, to jump on board and pay you some money so you can advertise for them. You need a lot of crazy numbers. So I want to hear from you. What are you thinking in terms of that? Yeah, obviously all of us are investing into podcasting. We're investing into having better quality. But we also have to think about sustainability. We also have to think about, how do we create a business model with this? So what are your thoughts on that? What are some of the things that you are thinking about, or some things you're trying or you've
Yeah.
tried that, might be working, or some that are not working?
That's a good question, actually. You bring up, because 2025 was the year of monetize. Like, I want to be able to start making money from my podcast, because I've been doing it for a while, and that's a journey that I want to be able to get sponsors, and I've started doing that. But I'll start off with this. I'm blessed to be, because my podcast is registered in the United States, even though I host it from the US, and this is where it's best. Even though I feature people from Uganda, Africa, most of the people are from Africa, from Uganda. So I'm on a better side of easy earning than a person who starts a podcast in Uganda, because it would be hard for them to get money. Like, sometimes even on YouTube, you can make the money, but to get paid, they will require you to have these. You have to put information in there, or like a social security. Like, a Ugandan doesn't have a social security number, or so it'll be hard. Even Ugandans on TikTok, it's harder for them to make the money. There've been a lot of people who have reached out to me like, "Hey, can you open up my account in the US so I can get paid from the US?" Things like that. So I am blessed, because now I can make some money from Spotify, which I don't think Ugandans can. I don't know if they have podcasts, the Spotify yet. I think Spotify is in Uganda for the music. I'm not sure. Somebody was saying they don't have Spotify in Uganda. I'm not so sure about that. But and then YouTube, you can make some money from YouTube, that I've been getting that. But I understand your point. Like, we can invest, we do the job to make the work, the production better, everything. But on the back end, we also need to start monetizing or getting the money back from it. What I've started doing too, this year, 2025, like I said, I've been trying to get some external sponsors for my show. We're in talks with some of the companies in Uganda, because I wanted to advertise their products on my podcast, to start incorporating that in there. And yeah, you're right. They need some crazy numbers for them to be able to do that. But one thing that
They want TV numbers. That's
TV
the problem.
numbers, yeah. But one thing that I've told the people that I've reached out to, and other podcasters can use, is like, when we do these podcasts are different than TV. TV is going to run your ad at 7 p.m. It will go off. Your podcast is going to be on the internet for the rest of your life, till internet is on. It's going to be there. And that ad, when it's in your video, it's going to be on that episode for the entire life. So that's something they need to think about. And the other thing is, in Africa, podcasting is, I won't say Africa, I'll say Uganda. Ugandans have been so slow in picking up on podcasts, but now it's kind of picking up. Everybody's doing a podcast. People are starting to listen to podcasts, because I didn't have a background of reading, and I find it easier to just listen. I would listen to you talk for 2 hours, then I can't read a book for 2 hours. So I sell it to them that it's on a high raise right now. When you advertise with us, people are starting to listen to it. Jump on right now before it gets so crazy and you cannot jump on later. Let's get it on together. And this is an advice for other podcasters, and trying to get to sell it to them. Yes, the struggle and the challenge we have is numbers. I have struggled with YouTube. I don't know. I do my production, I do everything. I still make money from YouTube, even with the few numbers that I get. One of the things that I did was, I'm not really concerned about numbers. I'm really concerned about the quality of work I'm doing. And am I getting better? Am I growing? The numbers, I don't have control over that. I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to research. I'm going to do the best I can. And so what my DOP told me was, the people that you get to watch your podcast, those are your people. And those people are coming there for that reason. So when you're selling these products, these are target numbers. And when you see the analytics for your podcast, you see the age group. My age group is between 25, 37. So I reached out to UBL, Uganda Breweries Limited. They sell alcohol, drinks. So see my age group. Even if I had 500 people listen to my podcast, that age group, those are the people that you're going to reach to sell your products to. They'll be interested in that. And not only that, these things are going everywhere on the internet. What you can see on one platform like I have a video on Instagram that's 1 million views. Like when you put these videos somewhere else,
That's
it's
amazing.
going everywhere. Like you might not have the million view on here, but it is there. So when we are selling, that's something other podcasters need to think about, because sometimes you're not gonna get the money from YouTube, especially for the people in Uganda. I don't know how it is in Rwanda, but that to get the money of these American companies, because YouTube is an American company, it is something that they're
Yeah.
from Uganda, they're from the States. So to be able to make that money, some people have to do what I told you, like reach out to them. Hey, can you open this up for me or this up for me? But until our countries figure out how and this, I'm not saying that none other people are getting paid. There are some people who are getting paid for the content they're doing, but it's not easy for everybody, especially when you're just starting up. So that's what I would say. I'm still in a learning process of that. I would love for us to start getting paid for the work we do, because, like we said, we put in a lot of work in this thing. Like right now, we're shooting. I edit my videos. I promote my video on social media because, like I said, it was a one-man show. So you put in a lot of time. So it's easy to.
Yeah.
The other day I got an invoice from Instagram. I was happy about it. Like I even I shared it on my Instagram. Like it's cool to just be. I'm an aircraft mechanic. That's my full-time job. Then I do podcasting on the side. But I was at work and I checked my email, and Instagram sent me an invoice with some money. I was like, that makes me happy. But I'm yet to get to the.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I'm yet to get to the level where, like, what I've invested is still a lot, but I'm not
Yeah.
complaining, because I say this as a hobby. It's not. I didn't study it as a
Of
business.
course.
So when you get something back, it makes you happy. It's not to the level what I've invested
Yeah.
in, but again, like you said to the beginning, it was a passion, and I'm still doing it as a passion. But it would be nice to get some money back. So that's what I would say about it.
No, great insights, man, and congrats on starting to monetize already. That's commendable.
Anyway, I love that question, and we could talk for forever. But on the podcast, I have 4 segments. We're gonna try to go through them. It doesn't hurt if we don't go through them. If we find a question that diverts us, people will love it. And I like spontaneous things. I'm all for spontaneous. But my first segment is this or that. I have 5 questions that I'm gonna ask you for all the entrepreneurship you're doing, podcasting, market, job, office, everything. The first one: listening to podcasts or reading a book?
I don't know, maybe I'm biased because I'm a podcaster. So I want to support other podcasters. But reading books has never been my thing, right? Like me finishing up a book is really, really, really hard. I get to read a lot of books now on my iPad, but like picking up an actual physical book and like opening it up and like reading it through 500, 300 pages is really hard for me. I would only do exceptions when a lot of people have recommended a specific book. If a lot of people have recommended a specific book, let's say, a biography of somebody that I admire, either in entrepreneurship or like, I don't know, like a president or something like that, and then I would read something like that. But then it would have to be like me being on a plane where I'm traveling somewhere for like 8 hours, right? Then I'm like, I'm stuck with this book. Like there is no way, I have to watch this thing. Oh, sorry, I have to read this thing. But I definitely prefer listening to podcasts or even watching. Watching is better for me. I prefer watching podcasts. So I would say definitely listening to podcasts for sure.
I think in a million ways we are alike, and I'm starting to discover that though you and I are alike in some ways, because I'll only read a book if it's a biography of somebody, like Kevin Hart, like somebody I really admire. I want to know more about their lives. Like I cannot just pick up a book, any book, and just start reading that. Like I have to read this book because I'm like looking for something. But mostly it would be podcasting. Like for podcasts, I can even listen to a podcast of somebody I don't know, I've never heard of.
Yep.
And it's just, I just want to see, like, if the topic is about something, like Jay Shetty hosts a lot of people like I've never heard of, but because Jay Shetty and the way he asks his questions, I want to learn about somebody. And there's a lot of podcasts where I've learned about somebody I didn't know through just listening to their podcast. So 100%, I would definitely do podcasting too. And maybe because I'm biased too, I love to learn from other people, like how they ask their questions. I like how he asks this question. So it comes to your head and you're like, I need to incorporate that in my podcast and to get better.
For sure. 100%.
Remote work or office setup?
Office setup.
Yeah.
Might get in a lot of trouble for this. I fight a lot with, or more like argue a lot with a lot of my friends who are also founders of companies. And then whenever we find ourselves like in a group with like other founders and we're like having lunch or something and we're talking. So then I would have friends who are who have like a, work from home kind of policy for their entire company. Like they have like 20, 30, 50 employees and everybody works remotely. And they're like, this is the best thing. And then I would tell them that, for us in our Kigali office, we're about 20 people. And I'm big on working in the office, right? For a couple of reasons, right? I think number one, personally, I believe that people should step in the office and then feel like I'm coming to work,
yeah.
right? I'm coming to work. There's a mission that I have to achieve, because that's just the way that I approach me walking into the office, right? I always tell people that as soon as I walk into the office, it's war. I'm at war right now,
Yeah.
right? I'm at war with whatever we're gonna be facing today. And by the time I leave the office, I'm expecting a lot of people not to follow me at home, even though sometimes it ends up doing that. But I always want to say, if I leave work at 5 p.m., I don't want to do a lot of things that are related to work because I've given it my best. I get into the office super early and then I like to leave, around 5 or 6. And then so I can be like, okay, great. This is time for me to do other things. Let me do a podcast. I usually do a podcast right after work, or let me do other things. Right. But then if I did not give it 100%, if I was, doing a lot of things in between, then I'm not able to have more time to do other things. And I believe I have a bias where I feel like people who work remotely, number one, it disrupts with your life because it's very hard to understand because you're working at any given time. Like you can wake up at 5 a.m. and you open up your laptop and you start working. You work until 8 a.m. and then you take a nap and then you start working again at a specific time. Sometimes you end up working a lot longer hours that you don't get compensated for. And it really disrupts with your schedule because it's very hard to know, do I need to stop now? Can I continue? Because you can like stop and make a sandwich and then go back to work and like do that kind of stuff. So I kind of feel like there's a lot of disruption and distractions, when you're working from home. But again, that's just my personal belief. I don't want anybody on the internet to attack me and say you're against any of these things. But I'm a big office kind of person. But then we did implement in my company, we did implement 1 day remote, day for everybody. So people can choose 1 day of the week where they can work from home. So they work 4 days in the office, which I think is pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, I do get pushback from people on the team, but I'm always like, hey, let's this is much better. Trust me.
No, I definitely agree with you. However much I would love to work from home, I feel like I'll get so bored from it. I'm a type of person who, you get bored from working at the same place all the time. But it's easy. I can easily get distracted if I'm working from home. Like even I find that even when just editing my podcast, like I would say, okay, I'm gonna do some editing, but because I'm home, there's a soccer game going on. There's a like something, and it's not like. But when I'm at work, it's like that's the only thing that's there. You're gonna do the work. I think the argument people can argue both ways, but it's just definitely an opinion that somebody can choose.
Maybe another thing on that one as well. You get to also connect with teammates, right? I think you get to develop stronger bonds with people that you work with, and I think that's very important to be able to collaborate better, right? It's hard to collaborate with people that you haven't really created that bond. Again, my personal belief, I like to spend time with people, get to know who they are, so we can work better together, right? But then if you've only met people online, but like we don't know each other, we only meet on Zoom, and there's some key elements that are missing there to create genuine connections. That's just another thing I wanted to throw in there.
This is about hiring. Do you hiring for skill or hiring for potential? If you were to hire somebody,
before it used to be potential, now it's skill, right? I've made a lot of mistakes when it comes to hiring, and that's a lot of entrepreneurs make a lot of mistakes, when you're building a company, because you don't know what you're doing most of the time, and you can only learn so much from your own thoughts, but I think experience is the best teacher, right? So I think now it's about skill, right? Because hiring potential is very tricky, right? It should be the thing to do, all right? It should be what we are all supposed to do. But again, depending on the stage where your company is at, I think you can't keep hiring for and guessing, oh, this person, I think they will become great. I believe they will become great. It's like we're at a point where, as a company, we need to get stuff done now.
Exactly.
There's no time to learn on the job. It's literally, I want to hire somebody and I want that person to solve my problems within the first day.
Right.
I want them to walk into the door and say, hey, these are all the challenges I've identified, and I have a couple of suggestions of how we can solve them. That is what I'm looking for, because that saves a lot of time. Hiring potential is very expensive. But again, when you're getting started in your as a business owner, it might be the only choice that you have, because you don't have money to be able to pay skilled people. All right, because skilled people are expensive, right? Everybody's looking for them. Everybody wants to give them a job offer. So I think depending on the stage of the company, you might choose one of them. But I believe that as your company matures, anyone will always tell you that they're now looking for skilled people, because it just saves you a lot of time and a lot of resources going forward. So definitely skilled where I am right now.
I think I like your answer where you said, like, depending on where the company is at. I would say for my current job where I was hired for potential, because so I put in my resume to get a job. I'm an aircraft mechanic, like I said. I was coming from a cargo airline where I was working on the Boeing 767, 747. I was getting to a job to work on private jets, smaller aircraft. I put in my resume. I had experience from the 777s or 767, those bigger Boeings. But this place I was looking for a job. They say you don't have the experience we're looking for right now, because I've not worked on any of the aircrafts that they have. At that moment, I was looking for a job. I was just wanting to move to the location. And I remember talking to my, what's his name, supervisor, director of maintenance. I said, how do you expect me to look for? Because in their response of the email, they said, if you get the experience of this aircraft that we're working on, you feel free to reapply. So that bothered me, because I'm like, how do you expect me to get that experience of those aircrafts that you have at your location and then come back and work in that location? If you want the experience from that location, give me the opportunity to work on those, and then I get the experience. So I think they liked the response that I gave them back on the email. And this is another thing I talk about, not to give up, because the door is closed. You can still knock. I mean, you can't knock for forever, but like you can't just give up. But yeah, so then I got hired in without experience on these aircrafts. And just a month in, they liked my determination. They like how fast I learn. And now, like, I've been there for over 5 years, and it's great. It's getting better. So you think about it as a company owner. What do you want? Where do you want? Because if your company is just starting and you start with just potential, you're not going to go anywhere. Like, you need something to push you forward. So I understood that from what you just said. So like, I love that. I love that. I love this conversation. I love it. This question is about the ecosystems, like Rwanda's startup ecosystem or Kenya's startup ecosystem. Which one like better? Is that how I would say it? Or like, what can you say about that? Because you're into the ecosystem.
I think my answer to this one is going to potentially be like the previous one as well. I think depending on what stage of your company is at, then you might see benefits on one of them. And the reason why I say that is because I believe that Rwanda has probably the best ecosystem in the region for you to do a POC, proof of concept, right? So the policies are there. There's enabling environment. It's really easy to access, a lot of things that you need in the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey, right? So if you're working on fintech, a central bank is very welcoming and, willing to share information about what does it take to get a license? How can we put you in a sandbox so you can test your idea with real customers, right? It's relatively easy to be able to, access a lot of those, facilities, right? We have a lot of entrepreneurial, let's say, ecosystem support organizations that are in the markets that are helping, companies start off, but also get exposed to other companies and also connect with other entrepreneurs. We have the Norskin Startup House, which houses more than 1,000 entrepreneurs. Beautiful place to be at if you're getting started, because just getting a desk there and being able to connect with other founders, that's amazing, and can help you to get the first users, get the first couple of partners and collaborators, which is really good. You have a couple of other co-working spaces in the market that are pushing for, let's say, training programs for how do you build your your pitch deck. How do you pitch to investors? How do you develop a marketing strategy and a sales strategy? And how do you grow your company and start generating some revenue? So I think that's really important if you're getting started. And I would definitely highly recommend starting a company from a place like Rwanda. And I believe that if you were to do something similar in the Kenyan market, that will be a little bit harder for a couple of reasons, right? The Kenyan ecosystem is much more developed, right, in the region, but even on the continent, right? So what you find in a very developed ecosystem is that there's a lot more competition, right? And that's very, very, very hard for you to build your company, because you're gonna be you're always gonna feel like, a competitor is gonna can build this feature that I'm trying to do. Why are they not building it, right? And that's always gonna be discouraging, because you're getting into this huge market. It's super fast paced. Everybody is running fast. Everybody talks about that in Nairobi. Everybody's running fast. Everybody has something to do. Investors don't have time to listen for a long time about your pitch. It's like, get to the point. What is this business? How is this going to make money? How is this going to scale all over the continent? And I believe that Kenya is much more interesting if you're trying to scale your business, right? So you've been able to prove the concept. You've been able to have couple of users who are using your product and they like it. And you're generating a little bit of money. Now you need to go and play with the big boys, right? Because Nairobi, you only go there if you want to play with the big boys, right? I tell founders that if you're trying to scale to Nairobi and you don't have a couple of millions of dollars to scale your company there, it's going to be very challenging. Not impossible, but very challenging. And it's going to take a while for you to grow there, because in almost any field that you're building in, there is competition, right? So you really have to be better than everybody, or just have a lot more money to survive the market, in the market the longest. So that's what I would say, that really dependent on where you are in your entrepreneurial journey. You might see benefits in being in one of the markets. So just to summarize there, Rwanda, proof of concept, things are set up to help people being able to launch their company and get those first few, use cases of their product. And then if you want to scale and go and play with the big boys, go and, get a bigger contract, then you go to Nairobi. You can also raise a lot more money in a place like Nairobi, because the investor ecosystem is much more developed there.
I know this wasn't part of the question, but where would you rank Uganda's ecosystem in that? You've given the comparison between Rwanda and Kenya, but how about Uganda? What do you think about Uganda?
So I'm just getting to learn a lot more about Uganda, right? So as I mentioned, we are launching in Uganda. That's part of the reason why I'm spending a bit more time here. Meeting people in the ecosystem, understanding the ecosystem a bit better, meeting people in the government, meeting some investors, meeting some companies as well. I'm really trying to figure out, because I'm trying to even write something about it, right? Something about my experience, trying to scale in Uganda and say like, what are the key learnings that I can, share with other people who are interested in this market. I would say, so if I was to rank, I would say Kenya is definitely very exciting. I mean, there's a lot more money for startups in Kenya. I mean, there's been a lot of work that's been done in that space. Uganda is kind of like in the middle of like Uganda is like in the middle of like I don't know, like Kenya and Tanzania in a way. It has a lot of like pros and cons as well. But I'm particularly interested in this market for a lot of reasons, because I just see a lot of opportunities here. I don't know if it's because I'm still fresh off the boat, in the market. But as soon as I got here, I was like, oh my God, every day I'm waking up and I have a new business idea. I have a new way of how we could, add on a new feature on our platform to accommodate to the market here. So Uganda has a lot of opportunities when it comes to digitization, right? I believe across the board, right? You need digitization almost like any sector, right? I still see a lot of paperwork here, and then when I speak to people, they're very interested in being able to digitize things, right? So you're even talking about starting to digitize, very simple things, documents in offices, and every office I walk in, there's like a lot of paperwork, and I'm like, okay, great. There's a way that we could, digitize that in a way. But to me, instead of seeing that as a challenge, I see it as an amazing opportunity for entrepreneurs here. One of the things is that I'm not seeing, I'm failing to see a lot more, let's say, opportunities that bring together entrepreneurs. All right. So, for example, as I mentioned, in Kigali, you would have, these startup houses, these, incubators that would be hosting, let's say, big events for entrepreneurs to connect with others. All right. So if I'm landing in Kigali for the first time and I'm gonna spend a couple of weeks, in those weeks, I'm definitely gonna attend 2 or 3 startup events for sure. All right, or a conference or something. I'm gonna attend something that is related to tech, that I'm gonna meet other founders and potentially investors as well. In Kenya, the same, right? Very vibrant, a lot of things happening in the ecosystem. In Uganda, I'm not seeing many of those, right? So there's a couple of entrepreneurial communities here and there, but I'm not seeing that kind of like sense of like, let's bring the ecosystem together. Let's figure out how we could grow each other. How do we, how do, let's say, smaller companies start collaborating with bigger, let's say, startups in the market, and all of those collaborations start by, first of all, bringing people together so people know each other. So people know that, okay, great, Yussouf is here, he's building Bag. Okay, there's another person who's building this. Hey, there's gonna be a meetup on Friday. Let's all meet up and talk and figure out what we can do together. Like that's, you need a person or a body or an agency that brings people together so people can collaborate. So maybe in a couple of months, I'll have a much more straightforward answer for you. Once I do a proper, I have a proper conclusion.
Definitely understand that. But I'll do also a follow-up question, because I'm interested to find out, when you were talking about Nairobi, you talked about fast-paced, people are doing this, like everything is fast-paced. And you're not the first person to say that, everything is fast-paced. When we go to Uganda, personally, I've had an issue with dealing, like even this thing, especially I think for me, I have different challenges of being in the US trying to coordinate things in Uganda. First of all, with time zone. Second, it has to be via like virtual or digital phone call. It's never in person. How have you found scheduling meetings and time management in Uganda? Like in that comparison, I'll say Uganda is slow. People take their time. You schedule a meeting. Somebody says, okay, like, tell me about that and be honest with it, like, because.
But Bunny, I see you trying to hit 1 million views on this one, huh? You're trying to sacrifice me, huh? I still want to do business here, man. I still want to do business here. Anyways, no, I do agree with you. I think, again, I think it might be like a cultural thing, though, right? I think people really do like to take their time with things. I think if we were to come to a conclusion or a diplomatic way to put it, it's people like to take their time. People like to be very much like it's almost like it's like a slow onboarding into things. It's like, hey, take it easy, hold my hand, and let's let's move forward. So I definitely agree with you. I think so a good example of that illustrates that is that so I was supposed to meet up with this entrepreneur, and so usually the way I schedule meetings is I'm a big calendar person. If something is not on my calendar, it is not happening. Right, in my head, it's not happening because I wake up in the morning, I look at my calendar. What do I have to do? And that's what I do. If something is not on my calendar, most of the time I will not attend or I will not do it because I really like to follow that religiously. And so I like to book meetings and put them on my calendar. So I use a lot of scheduling tools. I always send people my link and I'm like, hey, just book a time on my calendar. It's going to show you my availability, or send me yours and I'm happy to book that. So because I'm here, I'm meeting a lot of people, and so booked this meeting with this person, and then they used the link, they booked it on my calendar, it was in my calendar, and then like 2-3 so a couple of days passed, and then the day of the meeting, a couple of hours before the meeting, like a couple of minutes, an hour, let's say an hour before the meeting, they text me and they say, is the meeting still happening? And then I'm like, that's a very strange question 1 hour before the meeting. And I responded, I'm like, hey, nothing has changed on my side. So, I'm literally even on my way to the meeting. Like nothing has changed on my side. And then when I got to the meeting, so this person told me, like, they're like, I was like, why did you ask me? Why did you ask me, like, if the meeting happening? Like, if something is not happening, I will literally cancel it. I will try to give you a notice of a couple of hours. Like, I will tell you, hey, I'm not gonna make it. Something came up, but they were like, hey, this is Uganda, right? This is how things are. Like, people cancel last minute. People cancel last minute here.
I've been holding it when you're talking because I wanted you to finish, but I felt like I couldn't hold it anymore because the same exact thing happened to this podcast scheduling. I schedule my podcast on the calendar. The reason why I texted you yesterday and your response was like, hey, bro, I already confirmed. The reason why I can resonate with that, and the reason why that happened, is this is Uganda.
Yeah.
I started doing that every day, Friday, 24 hours before because I've been here, get ready, prepared for a podcast. You get a text, hey, bro, I'm not going to make it. In like 5 minutes to time. And
wow.
So the reason why I usually text my guests on Friday is like, hey, reminding you we have a podcast. I never do it if I knew, because that's how I am. I look at my calendar. I have a scheduled podcast recording on Saturday at this 5 p.m. And that's in my head. I even have a reminder on top of my phone. This is what I'm going to do tomorrow. But not everybody does like that, especially Uganda. And that was the reason why I asked you that question.
But to be fair, it's in a couple of other countries as well. Yeah. Like it might not just be something here. I think it also has to do with I think the reason why we're like this is because maybe we are used to using a lot of technology. Right? Because I also schedule meetings with people, and somebody would say, okay, great, I'm available at this time on this specific day. But then they never send you their email so you can book it in their calendar. They're just like, yes, we're going to meet at this place. And I'm like, okay, great. But then how are you going to remember this? Like, are you going to note it down on your on your notebook? Like how are you going to remember about this? So then I'm like, okay, am I just the only one who's like very like big on calendars and stuff? And other people just have other better ways of being able to, remember things. Because for me, it's like, if it's not there, like I have to put the location, I have to put everything. So I'm like, yeah, perfect. So it's very interesting booking meetings here.
A lot of my guests who tend to be Ugandan, they get amused when I text them, okay, send me your email so I can put this on the calendar. It helps me. It helps my DOP because the studio, I booked a session. And if my DOP doesn't find anything on that day, Sometimes he'll shoot me a text, say, Bonnie, are you doing a podcast? Are you doing this? But yeah, it really helps a lot. And I think that's one of the things that I would say from Uganda that I would love to see that change, and it would help a lot of business in Uganda if that part was fixed. Like it would be. And I knew this before even I asked you the question, because I know that's one of our biggest challenge. Once entrepreneurs or people in Uganda fix that part, I think things will go a little bit more smooth, and it's not bad. Anyway, we had it's funny that we ran the whole podcast and just my this or that segment, which is fine. I love it. I love the conversation. The one other question is on this or that, or is AI driven recruitment or human led hiring? Like, would you go AI to recruit people, or you would like to have it like human led to get the people you want in your company?
Very interesting question. It's something I think I was even talking about this with someone a couple of days ago, a head of HR at a company. But also, so there's this company that just raised a lot of money in the US. Actually, I'm not sure I remember their name, but they just raised like $100 million or something like that. And the founder of that company, I think he jumped on the video advertising and announcing that raise. He said he was like, AI is better at hiring than people, because it's less biased, and then he just goes on and on and to talk about that. And I was like, that's a very bold statement, but it's actually very interesting to be able to understand what he means by that, because I do understand what he means by that, because we use a lot of AI on our software to do a lot of shortlisting. And yes, I definitely don't want to come across as a politician, but I'm always giving out, there's pros and cons to both. Again, it depends on, it's going to go back to depending on the size of the company. Why? When you're getting started, when you're building your company when you're getting started, let's say you're building a studio, or you're launching a new shop or whatever, the first couple of hires that you hire, you as a founder, you have to be very much involved in that process. Like, you have to bring on board the first couple of hires. I would even say the first 5, 10, some people would even go to 20 or 100. First couple of hires, the founder or the owner of the business has to be involved every step of the way. Because what you're trying to do is that you're trying to bring on people who you are going to build a culture together. Mm-hmm. Right. And those early days of building a company are very important, because they're going to help you to build, the kind of culture that you want to build. Do you want to hire, let's say, people who work for hours and hours that they never complain about, wanting to go home and that they're working hard? Do you want to hire people who just want to do their job and go home after that? So I think in the beginning, first couple of days, you have to be involved every step of the way. So I would definitely go with the human centric approach. But as you grow as an organization, there becomes a lot of different things that it just becomes not scalable for you to do that process anymore. It becomes inefficient because it takes a lot of time. It costs a lot of money. Again, it's literally the reason why, we're building our startup, because, we see a lot of companies spending a lot of money and time going through resumes, meeting people, having a line of 100 people standing up in in their hallway waiting for it to be interviewed. And there is a lot of AI tools that can help to, make that process more efficient, because you could do a lot of those processes online, and then the only people you're meeting are the people who are actually the best, and you've saved yourself a lot of time for fraction of the cost. So I would say, as you grow, AI makes more sense because it will save you a lot of time and money. But then when you're getting started, I would say the first couple of people, you have to be involved. You have to be there. You have to, so they can help you shape the culture that you want.
Definitely. I think I agree with that. Now, for my listeners, they know usually this or that, usually it takes like maybe 5 minutes or something, but this or that took 45 minutes, and I really love it, because there is what that does is, like, a lot of stuff that I have in my main segment is what we covered when you're talking about this thing. So it saves me time to just go through that, but we're still going to have a main session. I'm just going to touch up on a few things that I know maybe we didn't touch on that maybe listeners would want to know. We've talked about BAG, and it was in the introduction. what inspired you to start Bag, and what does it stand for?
What does it stand for? I always tell people secure the bag.
Yeah, that's
I'm
a good
kidding.
one. Yeah.
So it's in full. It stands for building a generation, right? One of the motivations in the early days was we noticed that one of the things that led us to build Bag was employers were complaining that a lot of people that they wanted to hire, a lot of the job seekers they were meeting, did not have the skills that they're looking for. And we looked at the schools that are graduating all these people that the companies are saying, okay, they don't have the skills. We're like, okay, great. Where did you go to school? Let's go and talk to the school and understand what the school do in that process for you not to be prepared. And what we realized was that schools still don't have a very good connection to the job market. So universities would teach something, but then as soon as you graduate, that thing is already obsolete on the market, right? Because they did not collaborate with an employer. So somebody's going to apply for a job, but then whatever they studied has become obsolete. So if I always give an example. If you're learning finance and maybe you're not learning elements around financial technology, you're not learning elements around blockchain or cryptocurrency, just understanding those basics. By the time you graduate and you go to try and get your first internship, your first job, it might be with a fintech company.
Mhm.
It might be with a fintech startup here in Uganda, right? Or anywhere in East Africa. And some of those companies are going to be like, yeah, we want somebody who has a little bit of an understanding. You don't have to be an expert, but a little bit of an understanding about these key components of what we're trying to do. So, and that graduate would be like, yeah, I've just been learning how to debit and credit and, all the basic stuff that a lot of software can actually do. So then you realize that education, to some extent, becomes obsolete. Becomes a waste of time of the 4 years, waste of time and money, I would say. So then, so we basically wanted to figure out a way to build a new generation of problem solvers and critical thinkers, because critical thinking and problem solving are the skill sets that employers are looking for the most in entry-level talent, right? They're not necessarily looking for a lot of technical skills because they know that they can teach you a lot of these things once you start working. But in the beginning, it's like they want you to be able to go into the company, see that there's a problem, and give suggestions of how that problem could be solved, and not wait for your boss and say, oh, my boss knows better. I'm going to wait for my boss and do X, Y, Z. So I think just understanding and speaking to people who are running businesses, struggling to find people, speaking to educators, so schools, and understanding what is a disconnect between what the market is looking for and what they're teaching, and also speaking to graduates, we're able to start understanding that we need to do something that is a little bit innovative to be able to solve this problem. So that's the reason why we started Bag, and we've gone through a lot of pivots. The initial product that we had in the beginning is not what we have now,
Mhm.
but again, the core still is the same. We are very passionate about work experience. We believe that we can help companies democratize the way that they provide work experience opportunities, right? Right now, if you're a graduate, you go for a job, they're going to ask you for how many years of experience you have, and you've been studying your whole life. So how are you supposed to get that? So our goal is, with our platform, we're able to partner with companies to understand what it's like to work in a specific role, and then use that information to design job simulations that simulate what it's like to work in that job. I think you would know that in aviation, right? So think about, the flight simulator, but now think about for a job. Not the 3D version, but think about the 2D version. So like completing tasks, working on projects, your documents and so on, uploading them, receiving feedback, and building up a portfolio of work. So that when you go for a job, you can say, hey, I haven't been fortunate enough to have an uncle who's very well connected so they can give me a job. But I've been on this platform where I've been completing tasks from companies. I know what it takes. I know what companies are looking for. And you can see on my portfolio what I bring to the table. So that's really what we do. And we have a lot of other features for employers where they can do AI shortlisting, onboarding, building pipelines, and so on.
That's amazing, and that's a great initiative, innovative, like that you started, which I think is gonna change
Thank
our
you, man.
generation and the way you put it. Um, one of the other thing I will hook you up. I don't know if you've heard of another podcast in Uganda called Suna. Suna is into like he has a tech
Suna.
podcast, but I'll share with you his contacts on his on WhatsApp. But his podcast is about like technology, and he interviews a lot of people around Africa, Kenya. He will be a great guy too to talk to. His podcast is different because he does seasons. He only just releases a bunch,
Mm.
but
Oh,
I
okay.
don't like that strategy
Interesting.
in my opinion. I like a daily thing, but he does like seasons and just puts all of them there at once. But he'll be another great guy to talk to. I'll see if I can connect him to you.
For
But
sure.
what's the biggest learning experience as an entrepreneur in Rwanda? Like, what have you learned as an entrepreneur in Rwanda?
Man, it's a lot of things. We would be here for another 4 hours.
Yeah.
If I was to say the biggest lesson has been that we need to be building for Africa. Uh, Actually, not even Africa. We need to be building for the world. And I think that's probably one of the things that I've learned over the years, and it's something that I'm definitely taking into my new season of my entrepreneurial journey. And that's one of the things that I'm sharing a lot with a lot of entrepreneurs who are getting started, is that we need to stop thinking about building solutions just for a specific small demographic or a small market. We need to be thinking about, we need to be saying, I want to build a great solution for farmers. And it doesn't matter where these farmers are. You can start with farmers who are nearby. You can say, okay, great. To start off, to do a pilot, I'm going to start with farmers in this particular area in Uganda. But your solution should be focusing on farmers. The reason why I say that is, as soon as you say, I'm building this solution for farmers in Kampala, or let's say in Western Uganda, for example, you're already making your market size very, very small. All right, because you're only going to focus on those, and you're going to learn their behaviors. You're going to learn everything, all their challenges, and you're going to try to solve for them. But then if you, let's say, try to scale that business as you try to grow, and you try to take it to Malawi, for example, you realize that the cultural differences are there, and it might be very hard to apply whatever you've built in Uganda and make it applicable there. Instead of doing that, what you would do, you would try to do, is to say, I want to build a great solution for farmers who are facing this particular problem, or I want to solve this particular problem. I'm very passionate about this problem that farmers face. And if possible, it could be something that a farmer in Brazil, could potentially use as a solution, right? You building it here, but you're able to, ship it to Brazil, and somebody uses it there. You're able to ship it to Vietnam, right? Or from here. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned. A lot of people who've been in the tech space, longer than I have been telling me about this the last couple of years. I wasn't able to understand it, but now I get it. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons. It's, we need to be building for the world, that we're going to see a lot more growth when we're building companies from Africa that, the world is using, right? The same way that we're sitting here and we're using Spotify or Instagram, and you've never met the founder of Instagram, has never met you, doesn't know who you are. Like, they just see you as a number on a dashboard, and they can pull off your name, but they've never come to Uganda to come and pitch to Ugandans to use Instagram.
That's true.
We found Instagram somehow. So I think, how can we create a Ugandan startup that somewhere in Texas somebody's using it? And I'm like, oh, how did you find out about that? So I think that's a very interesting thing. I want to explore a lot more.
I like the way you broke that down, because one of the things that comes to my head, and I'll be remiss without saying this on the podcast before we close, because I'm a huge Arsenal fan, and every time I'm watching Arsenal, to see the visit to Rwanda on their jersey, it's like, yes, Rwanda will be looked at as a third world country, but here, they're not just looking at Rwanda, they're looking at a bigger project than that. Like, this Premier League goes all over the world, like everywhere. And every time somebody says visit Rwanda, I don't know how much that has been huge for Rwanda, but that was a smart move, not to just look at we're a tiny, small country, blah, 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 blah. But it took a big, and for me, just that. shows to me how far Rwanda is in type of like entrepreneurship and within the East Africa region. So that's one of the things I pick out and I look at. But it's really respect, and I loved learning a lot from you today about entrepreneurship. Again, this is a topic that I've not had on the podcast, but it's really cool to just sit down, listen to that. I hope my listeners today, they get to learn something different and get to listen to something different, which I think is like a cool conversation we've had on the podcast yesterday. But before I let you go, I have 5 questions, and these are rapid fire questions. You just give me one answer that comes to your head. You don't have to explain it. But if there's a question I ask you and something pops up, I mean, I'm not gonna hesitate talking about it. It's a podcast. But also the listening span of people, sometimes once it hits 1 hour, it's like, oh, I can't listen to it. Anyway, rapid fire. What's the best business advice you've ever received?
Build for the world.
That's a good one. Actually, you just explained it in the previous one. One entrepreneur in Africa you would love to interview or you haven't had yet on your podcast.
Tony Alumelu.
What's your go-to productivity hack?
Waking up early.
If you could start another business today, what would it be?
Not sure yet.
What's one book or podcast that has shaped your entrepreneur journey?
The Diary of a CEO.
Oh yeah, I love him. I've only watched a few episodes of him, but I love his podcast. Him and Jay Shetty on my. I also listen to a lot of like sports podcasts. I'm a big fan of sports. I love like listening to sports, but
I think the Diary of a CEO has great. He interviews great guests as well. So a lot of the people that he interviews, I really look up to them. So you're able to pick up some tips and tricks there about something you can apply.
I think one of the episodes I watched of him, he interviewed a soccer player. He was this guy who was banned for
Thierry Henry.
No, it wasn't Thierry Henry. He was playing for Brentford, and now he's in Saudi Arabia. He got banned for betting, so he was kind of interviewing him of his story. People who know I'm a big soccer fan, they're gonna hate me because of his name. Tony, who was for Brentford. He interviewed him for his journey and that of betting. He was explaining that, but that was a good one. Anyway, we've come to the end of this recording. I want to appreciate you for your time to making this happen. I can't wait for my listeners to tune in. And if you're listening, check out your podcast, what I'm building. And I'm sure we'll collaborate on some of these stuff that we've had today on our social media. My listeners should go check out your podcast. Everybody who is interested in entrepreneurship, learning about business, just like what you've had on my podcast, go check it out. Support, love, and everything you can do. And even on this podcast, if you're new here or they're from your podcast, check it out. I have a lot of guests from Uganda, around the world. I talk about different things. So yeah, I'm happy about this collaboration.
For sure, man. Thanks so much for having me. And this was a pleasure, and looking forward to doing more of these.
Yes, sir. I can't wait to be in Kigali sometime and get to meet you in person. That'll be dope. Final 3. They're also not long answers. Final 3 is what's a life lesson you've learned in life to this point?
Being as authentic as possible.
What gets you excited about life?
All the things that you can do with the amount of time that you have here.
Final one is a signature question for the podcast. Who would you like to see on this podcast next as a guest? And you help me get that person here.
I'm biased, man. I want to see entrepreneurs.
Entrepreneurs? Okay.
I want to see an entrepreneur. I want to see you interview more entrepreneurs from Uganda.
That'll be dope. Yeah.
So which entrepreneur? Maybe I'll give a shout out to some of the people that I know. Alan. Founder of Sente.
Okay, Alan, we're gonna have you on the podcast. Actually, I had one entrepreneur here, the founder of Kara. There's a guy, is April's young brother. He has a company called Kara. They make electric motorbikes. There's one episode, it's an older one. I'll share with you so you can check him out. And then Brian, the founder of Tubayo, is also another entrepreneur.
It's pretty cool.
Hey there, my name is Bonnie Chibuka, the podcast host of the Ugandan Boy Talk Show. Thanks for watching and listening to my podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. Also, leave a feedback on this podcast because that's how we grow. Thank you very much and be blessed.
My name is Yussouf Ntwali. I'm a Rwandan tech entrepreneur. I just did an amazing episode on the Ugandan Boy Talk Show and super excited for you guys to check it out.